Lieutenant Commander Kim Dae adjusted his collar and checked his reflection one last time in the small mirror of his quarters. The face looking back at him was not his own. Blue-green skin stretched across angular features with large, golden eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. 6 thin fingers flexed as he tested the holographic disguise that had taken months to perfect. He looked exactly like a Kelvin trader from the Outer Rim worlds. The transformation was complete down to the smallest detail. Even the breathing apparatus around his neck was functional. It's designed to make other species believe he needed different air to survive. The massive space station called Nexus hung in the void like a giant metal flower. Its 5 arms stretched out in different directions, each one home to different species and their embassies. Kim Dae had spent 3 weeks studying the station's layout, memorizing every corridor and every security checkpoint. Today was the day he had been preparing for during the last 2 years. The Galactic Council had called an emergency session, and human intelligence had intercepted enough coded messages to know something big was happening. Something that involved Earth and the human colonies. Kim Dae walked through the corridors of Nexus Station with careful steps. His fake identity as Merchant Velkin had been built over months of careful work. He carried trade documents, financial records, and even personal messages that would pass any security check. The holographic disguise was perfect, but it was the details that would keep him alive. The station buzzed with activity. Aliens of every size and shape moved through the wide hallways. Some floated in liquid-filled suits, others skittered on multiple legs, and a few seemed to be made of pure energy contained in special containers. The diversity was amazing, but also dangerous. Each species had different ways of detecting lies and deception. A security checkpoint appeared ahead. 2 guards from the hegemony stood at attention, their crystal-like bodies catching and reflecting the station's lights. Kim Dae had studied their species for months. They could detect emotional changes through subtle heat signatures, so he had to remain completely calm. Purpose of visit? The first guard asked in the common trade language. Trade negotiations with the Alterian Collective, Kim Dae replied smoothly. Dae's voice carried the slight accent he had practiced for hours. I have an appointment with Minister Cotton about importing rare minerals. The guard scanned Kim Dae's documents with a handheld device. The fake records showed exactly what they should show. Small-time merchant from a backwater world, trying to make deals with bigger players. Nothing suspicious or interesting. You are cleared to proceed to the commercial district, the guard said. The council chambers are restricted today. Kim Dae nodded and moved past the checkpoint. That was exactly what he had expected to hear. The commercial district was his cover. But getting to the council chambers would require more creativity. He made his way through the station's maze of corridors. The architecture was stunning but alien. Curved walls flowed into each other like water, and the lighting changed colors to match the time cycles of different homeworlds. Everything was designed to make the many species feel comfortable, but it made Kim Dae feel like he was walking through a dream. The commercial district was busy with traders from across the galaxy. Kim Dae played his part perfectly, stopping at various stalls and showing interest in their goods. He bought a few small items to complete his cover story, making sure to haggle in the way a real trader would. But his real destination was the maintenance levels below the council chambers. Human intelligence had discovered that the station's air recycling systems ran directly under the main meeting hall. If he could access those tunnels, he could find a way to observe the proceedings. Without being detected, an hour later, Kim Dae found what he was looking for. A maintenance hatch in a quiet corner of the commercial district led to the service tunnels. The area was empty, except for a few cleaning robots that ignored him completely. He quickly opened the hatch and slipped inside. The tunnels were narrow and filled with pipes and cables. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the walls. Kim Dae crawled through the cramped space, following the station blueprints he had memorized. The sound of his breathing seemed too loud in the confined space. After 20 minutes of careful movement, he reached his destination. Above him was a ventilation grate that opened directly into the main council chamber. Through the metal slats, he could see the massive amphitheater where the most powerful beings in the galaxy would soon gather. The chamber was enormous. Row after row of seats curved around a central platform where speakers would address the assembly. The ceiling was a dome of transparent material that showed the stars beyond. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Kim Dae carefully adjusted the grate so he could see and hear everything while remaining hidden. He activated his recording equipment and settled in to wait. The devices were human-made and completely undetectable by galactic technology. They would capture everything that happened in the chamber below. Slowly, the representatives began to arrive. Kim Dae recognized many of the species from his briefings, but seeing them in person was different. The Vorthok delegates looked like walking crystal cathedrals, each one unique and beautiful. The Salathi moved like liquid metal, their forms shifting and changing as they walked. The Nephrim arrived in their environmental suits, their gaseous bodies swirling in patterns that Kim Dae had learned were a form of communication. The Titan clan sent their largest representatives, being so massive that the station had to reinforce the floors to support their weight. As more and more delegates filled the chamber, Kim Dae began to understand the scope of what was happening. This was not just a council meeting. This was a gathering of every major power in the galaxy. Something this big had not happened in centuries. The tension in the chamber was obvious even from his hiding spot. Delegates whispered among themselves, in dozens of languages. Some seemed angry, others afraid. A few appeared excited, as if they were looking forward to whatever was about to be discussed. Finally, the moment Kim Dae had been waiting for arrived. Council Prime Veltar, of the hegemony, stepped onto the central platform. His forearms spread, wide in a gesture of authority, and the entire chamber fell silent. "Honored delegates," Veltar began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "We gathered today to address a threat that grows stronger with each passing cycle. A threat that, if left unchecked, could destroy the peace and order we have built over millennia." Kim Dae felt his heart racing despite his training. This was it. The moment that would determine the fate of humanity. "Today we decide the future of the species known as humans." The chamber erupted in a mixture of sounds. Some delegates cheered, others hissed or made their species equivalent of worried noises. Kim Dae gripped his recording equipment tighter and prepared to learn just how much trouble his people were really in. From his hidden position, he watched as the most powerful beings in the galaxy prepared to discuss the extinction of his species. And they had no idea that one of their intended victims was listening to every word. Council Prime Veltar raised his forearms for silence. The massive chamber quieted as thousands of delegates turned their attention to the central platform. Kim Dae pressed closer to the ventilation grate, his heart pounding as he prepared to hear what crimes his species had supposedly committed. "Before we proceed with our deliberations," Veltar announced, "we must first understand the full scope of the human threat. Admiral Zethkal of the Dominion Fleet will present the evidence we have gathered." A figure stepped forward that made Kim Dae's blood run cold. Admiral Zethkal was a Corvin, one of the most feared warrior species in the galaxy. His gray skin was covered in battle scars, and his 6 eyes moved independently as he scanned the crowd. Now 3 rows of sharp teeth gleamed as he spoke. "Honored delegates," Zethkal began, his voice like grinding stone. "What you are about to see will shock you. The species we have been monitoring for the past 2 centuries is not the primitive civilization we once believed them to be." A massive holographic display materialized above the platform. Image showed Earth, blue and green and beautiful, rotating slowly in the darkness of space. Kim Dae felt a pang of homesickness as he looked at his homeworld. "This is the human homeworld," Zethkal continued. 200 years ago, they had not even achieved basic spaceflight. They fought wars with chemical explosives and metal projectiles. We classified them as a level 2 civilization, barely worthy of observation. The hologram changed to show early human spacecraft. Crude chemical rockets that looked like toys compared to the sleek ships that now filled the chamber. Several delegates made sounds of amusement at the primitive technology. "But observe how quickly they progressed," Zethkal said, and the display shifted to show more advanced ships. Within 50 years, they had developed fusion engines. Within a century, they had colonized their entire star system, and within 2 centuries, they had spread to 17 different star systems. The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs. Kim Dae knew the expansion statistics, but hearing them presented this way made human progress sound threatening and unnatural. This rate of expansion is unprecedented, Zethkal continued. No species in recorded galactic history has colonized so many worlds so quickly. The hegemony took 8 centuries to achieve similar expansion. The dominion required 12 centuries. The hologram now showed a map of human space. Red dots marked each colony world, connected by lines that showed trade routes and communication networks. To Kim Dae, it looked like progress and exploration. To the alien delegates, it probably looked like a spreading infection. But expansion alone is not what makes humans dangerous, Zethkal said. It is their technology and their tactics. The display changed again, showing human warships. Kim Dae recognized the designs of Earth Defense Force vessels. They were sleek and efficient, built for speed and maneuverability rather than brute force. Human military technology has advanced at an alarming rate, the admiral explained. Have developed weapons that can penetrate hegemony shields, armor that can withstand Dominion plasma cannons, and engines that make their ships faster than most of our interceptors. Kim Dae felt a mix of pride and worry. The human military had indeed made remarkable advances, but they had done so out of necessity. Living on the edge of known space meant dealing with pirates, hostile environments, and the occasional territorial dispute with alien species. More concerning than their technology, Zethkal continued, is their tactical thinking. Humans do not fight like civilized species. They do not follow established rules of engagement. They are unpredictable, ruthless, and willing to sacrifice everything to achieve victory. The hologram displayed a battle scene that made Kim Dae's stomach tighten. It was the Battle of Kepler 442, where Captain Lee Hain had made his famous last stand against 3 hegemony cruisers that had entered human space without permission. Observe this engagement, Zethkal said. A single human frigate, the Defiant, encountered 3 hegemony cruisers conducting what they claimed was a routine patrol. The human captain should have retreated or surrendered. Instead, he chose to fight. The hologram played out the battle in detail. Kim Dae watched as the Defiant used the gravity of a nearby planet to slingshot around the hegemony ships, firing at their engines and weapon systems with surgical precision. The human ship was smaller and less powerful, but Captain Lee had used every advantage he could find. The human captain used the planet's gravity well to accelerate his ship beyond safe limits, Zethkal explained. He overloaded his weapons to increase their power output, even used his ship's waste heat as a weapon, venting superheated plasma at close range. The battle ended with 2 hegemony cruisers disabled and the 3rd retreating. The Defiant had taken heavy damage but remained operational. The chamber watched in stunned silence as the human ship limped away from the battlefield. This is not how civilized species conduct warfare, Zethkal declared. Humans fight with desperation and creativity that makes them extremely dangerous. They do not accept defeat. They do not surrender when the odds are against them. They find ways to win that no other species would consider. Commander Velenik stepped forward to give his testimony. He was the hegemony officer who had commanded the retreating cruiser. His crystal-like body still showed crack marks from the battle damage his ship had sustained. I have fought in 47 engagements across my career, Velenik said in a voice like breaking glass. I have never encountered an enemy like the humans. They think differently than we do. They see opportunities where we see obstacles. They turn their weaknesses into strengths. The commander's testimony was devastating. He described how Captain Lee had used debris from his own damaged ship as projectile weapons. He had pretended to surrender, then used the ceasefire to reposition for a better attack. He had communicated with the hegemony ships in perfect hegemony language, but used their own protocols against them. The human captain knew our procedures better than some of our own officers, Velenik admitted. He had studied our tactics, our weaknesses, our standard responses. He was prepared for a fight that we thought would never happen. Meanwhile, on the human stealth ship Indomitable, hidden in the asteroid belt surrounding the Nexus system, Lieutenant Park Yoon watched the proceedings through Kim Dae's live transmission. She was the ship's intelligence officer, responsible for analyzing everything the Council revealed, Park Yoon took careful notes as each piece of evidence was presented. The aliens clearly knew more about human capabilities than anyone had realized. They had detailed records of human military exercises, shipping manifests, and even diplomatic communications. How long have they been watching us? She whispered to herself, as another display showed the locations of every human colony, complete with population numbers and industrial capacity. The presentation continued for another hour. Admiral Zethkol showed evidence of human scientific advancement, their development of new materials and energy sources, their experiments with faster-than-light communication. Each achievement was presented as a potential threat to galactic stability. In conclusion, Zethkol said as the presentation ended, humanity represents the most significant threat to galactic peace in over 1,000 years. They possess the technology, the tactics, and the will to challenge the established order. If we do not act now, they will eventually become too powerful to stop. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Kim Dae realized that everything he had just heard was being used to justify something terrible. The aliens were not just afraid of human expansion or technology, they were afraid of what humans might become. Council Prime Veltar stepped forward again. "The evidence is clear," he announced. "Now we must decide what to do about it." From his hiding place, Kim Dae watched as the most powerful beings in the galaxy prepared to decide the fate of humanity. And based on what he had just heard, he was not optimistic about their decision. Council Prime Veltar gestured with his 4 arms to quiet the chamber after Admiral Zethkol's presentation. The massive amphitheater buzzed with whispered conversations in dozens of languages. Kim Dae pressed his ear closer to the ventilation grate, knowing that what happened next would determine everything. "The evidence has been presented," Veltar announced. "We must hear all voices before we make our decision. The floor is open for debate." First to speak was Sage Morthan of the Ethereal Collective. His crystalline form floated above his designated platform, shimmering with internal light that pulsed in rhythm with his words. The Ethereals were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, and their wisdom was respected even by their enemies. "Honored delegates," Morthan began, his voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "We have listened to the charges against humanity. With great concern, we must ask ourselves, are we judging them for their crimes or for their potential?" A murmur ran through the chamber. "Das." Some delegates nodded in agreement, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "The humans have expanded rapidly, yes," Morthan continued. "But so did we all when we first reached for the stars. They have developed advanced technology, but they have not used it for conquest. They have fought when threatened, but they have not initiated wars of aggression." Kim Dae felt a spark of hope. At least some species were willing to consider humanity's perspective. "What the Admiral describes as dangerous unpredictability," Morthan said, "we might call adaptability. What he calls ruthless tactics, we might call creative problem-solving. The humans have shown remarkable restraint for a species with such capabilities." The ethereal sage paused, his form flickering brighter. "We propose a different solution. Instead of elimination, we suggest containment. Build a barrier around human space. Allow them to develop in isolation until they mature enough to join galactic civilization properly." The chamber erupted in discussion. Some delegates supported the idea, while others shouted their disagreement. Kim Dae watched as the galaxy's representatives divided into clear factions. General Carvos of the Titan clans stood to respond. His massive frame towered over the other delegates, and his voice boomed across the chamber like thunder. The Titans were warriors by nature, and their opinion carried weight with the military-minded species. "The Ethereals speak of containment, as if it were possible," Carvos declared. "But humans have already proven they can break through any barrier we might build. They have colonized 17 systems in 2 centuries. How long before they colonize 100, 1,000? The general activated his own holographic display, showing battle simulations that made Kim Dae's blood run cold. The scenarios depicted human fleets engaging galactic forces in massive space battles, with casualty numbers that reached into the millions. "Our strategic analysts have run extensive simulations," Carvos continued. "If human expansion continues at its current rate, they will pose a significant military threat within 3 centuries. If they continue to advance technologically, they could challenge the combined might of the hegemony and dominion within 5 centuries. The hologram showed a timeline of projected human development. Red markers indicated points where human capabilities would match those of various galactic powers. The implications were sobering. "We cannot wait for them to become unstoppable," Carvos declared. "We must act now, while we still have the advantage of numbers and established infrastructure." Ambassador Yathara of the Aquatic Conclave rose to speak next. Her translucent form rippled with emotional colors as she addressed the assembly. The aquatic species were known for their diplomatic skills and their ability to find compromise solutions. "General Carvos speaks of war as if it were inevitable," Yathara said, her voice carrying the rhythm of ocean waves. "But has anyone considered trying to communicate with the humans? They may be more reasonable than we assume." Several delegates made sounds of skepticism. The idea of negotiating with humans seemed to strike many as naive. "Humans have made no aggressive moves against any of our established territories," Yathara continued. "They have focused their expansion on uninhabited systems. When they encountered our patrol ships, they responded defensively, not aggressively. This suggests they may be open to dialogue." Kimde felt another surge of hope. Some species were willing to consider peaceful solutions, but then Minister Draxon of the Commerce Guild spoke up. His mechanical voice carried no emotion, but his words were devastating. "The economic impact of human expansion cannot be ignored. They have disrupted established trade routes, introduced competitive technologies, and driven down prices in several key markets. The Commerce Guild controlled much of the galaxy's trade, and their concerns carried significant weight with species that depended on interstellar commerce. Human manufacturing capabilities have improved dramatically," Draxon continued. "Their products are becoming competitive with established galactic brands. If this trend continues, it could destabilize entire economic sectors." Kimde realized that the debate was not just about military threats. Economics, politics, and fear of change all played roles in shaping galactic opinion about humanity. Dr. Choi Min, monitoring the transmission from the Human Research Station on Pluto, analyzed the political divisions as they emerged. She was humanity's leading expert on galactic politics, and her job was to understand how different species would likely vote. The older, more established species tended to support elimination or strict containment. They had built their power on the existing order and saw humans as a threat to their position. The younger species, those who had joined galactic civilization more recently, were more sympathetic to human concerns. The military species supported immediate action, while the diplomatic species favored negotiation. The economic powers were divided, with some seeing humans as threats and others as potential customers or partners. The debate continued for hours. Speaker after speaker rose to present their species' position. Some arguments were thoughtful and nuanced, others were driven by fear and prejudice. Kimde listened to every word, recording everything for later analysis. Counselor Vextel of the Hive Collective presented a particularly chilling argument. "Individual species may debate the morality of our actions," the insectoid delegate clicked, "but the collective good must take precedence. If humanity's expansion threatens galactic stability, then humanity must be stopped." The Hive Collective's support for elimination was significant. Their species controlled vast resources and had millions of ships at their disposal. But then, young Ambassador Lyrian of the Symbiotic Alliance spoke with passion about the value of diversity. "Every species brings something unique to galactic civilization," he argued. "Humans have already contributed advances in medicine, engineering, and agriculture. Eliminating them would be a loss for everyone." The Symbiotic Alliance was a coalition of newer species that had banded together for mutual protection. Their support for humanity was encouraging. Their military power was limited. As the debate wound down, Kimde realized that the galaxy was deeply divided. The vote would be close, and the outcome was far from certain. Both sides had presented compelling arguments, but fear seemed to be winning over hope. The final speaker was Elder Zarquan of the Ancient Watchers. His species was among the oldest in the galaxy, and they rarely involved themselves in political affairs. When he spoke, everyone listened. "We have watched the rise and fall of countless species," Zarquan said in a voice like distant thunder. "We have seen promising civilizations destroy themselves through war, and we have seen dangerous species mature into valuable allies. The question before us is not whether humans are dangerous. The question is whether we are wise enough to guide them toward peaceful coexistence." The chamber fell silent as the elder's words sank in. Kim Day held his breath, wondering if this ancient wisdom might sway the vote. But then Council Prime Veltar called for order. "The debate is concluded," he announced. "We will now proceed to the vote that will determine humanity's fate." From his hiding place, Kim Day watched as the most powerful beings in the galaxy prepared to decide whether his species would live or die. Council Prime Veltar stood at the center of the massive amphitheater, his forearms raised for absolute silence. The chamber held thousands of delegates from across the galaxy, and not a single sound could be heard. Kim Day pressed his face against the ventilation grate, his heart pounding so hard he worried the sound might give him away. "The debate has concluded," Veltar announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "We now come to the moment that will define our galaxy's future. The motion before us is simple. Shall we authorize the Galactic Defense Force to eliminate the human threat before it becomes unstoppable?" A holographic display materialized above the chamber, showing the voting interface. Each species would cast their vote publicly for all to see. There would be no secret ballots, no hidden agendas. Every delegate would have to stand before the galaxy and declare their position on humanity's fate. Kim Day watched in horror as the voting began. The process was alphabetical by species name, which meant the aquatic conclave would vote first. Ambassador. Euthera rose from her liquid-filled platform. Her translucent form rippled with colors that Kim Day had learned indicated deep sadness. "The aquatic conclave votes no," she announced. "We believe in the possibility of peaceful coexistence." A soft chime indicated that the vote had been recorded. One vote against extermination. Kim Day allowed himself a small moment of hope. The Ancient Watchers were next. Akuna's ancient form barely moved as he spoke. "We abstain. This decision belongs to the younger species who will live with its consequences." Kim Day felt disappointed, but not surprised. The Ancient Watchers rarely took sides in galactic politics. The voting continued in alphabetical order. Kim Day kept careful count, his military training helping him track the complex political mathematics. The Crystalline Confederacy voted no. The Dominion voted yes. The Ethereal Collective voted no, as expected. As more votes were cast, a pattern emerged. The older, more established species tended to support elimination. The younger species, those who had joined galactic civilization more recently, were more likely to oppose it. The military powers wanted action, while the diplomatic species preferred negotiation. The hegemony's vote was a foregone conclusion. Council Prime Veltar himself cast their vote for elimination. His forearms spread wide in a gesture of finality. The Hive Collective's vote was devastating. Their billions of members spoke as one voice through their representative. The collective good demands the elimination of the human threat. But then came surprises. The Iron Brotherhood, a militant species known for their aggressive expansion, voted against elimination. Their representative, War Chief Gramtar, explained their reasoning. "We respect humans as worthy opponents. To eliminate them without giving them a chance to prove themselves would be dishonorable." The merchant guilds were divided. Some saw humans as economic threats, others as potential customers. Their votes split almost evenly. Kim Day watched the holographic tally change with each vote. The numbers were close, far closer than anyone had expected. For every species that voted for elimination, another seemed to vote against it. The Symbiotic Alliance cast a powerful block vote against elimination. Their representative, Ambassador Lyrian, spoke with passion. "Diversity makes us stronger. We will not be party to genocide." The Titan clans voted for elimination, as expected. General Carvas made no speech, simply stating, The Titan clans vote yes. Strength respects strength, but we will not allow a potential enemy to grow too powerful. As the voting neared its end, Kim Dae realized the outcome would depend on a handful of undecided species. The neutral zones, the frontier worlds, independent systems. These smaller powers would determine humanity's fate. The neutral zones voted first among the undecided. Their representative, an elderly being whose species Kim Dae did not recognize, spoke slowly. "We have seen too much war. We vote no." The frontier worlds were next. These were the species that lived on the edge of known space, often in conflict with pirates and hostile environments. Their representative was a scarred warrior who had clearly seen combat. "The frontier worlds vote yes," she declared. "We know the dangers of unchecked expansion. We cannot risk another aggressive species in our territory." Kim Dae felt his hope slipping away. The vote was incredibly close, but the momentum seemed to be shifting toward elimination. The independent systems cast the final deciding votes. These were species that had refused to join any of the major galactic powers, preferring to remain neutral in most conflicts. Their votes could go either way. One by one, they cast their ballots. Some voted for elimination, others against. Kim Dae watched the tally shift back and forth, sometimes favoring humanity, sometimes condemning it. Finally, the last vote was cast. The holographic display showed the final tally, and Kim Dae felt his world collapse around him. 847 votes for elimination, 623 votes against, 156 abstentions. The motion had passed. The galaxy had voted to exterminate humanity, Council Prime. Veltar's voice boomed across the silent chamber. "The motion is carried. The Galactic Defense Force is hereby authorized to eliminate the human threat to galactic stability." The chamber erupted in a mixture of cheers and protests. Some delegates celebrated the decision, while others sat in stunned silence. Kim Dae watched in horror as his species' death warrant was signed by the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Fleet. Admiral Vexter of the Galactic Defense Force rose to address the assembly. His massive form commanded attention as he outlined the military operation that would destroy humanity. "The first wave will target the human homeworld," Vexter announced. "Earth's destruction will cripple human morale and eliminate their primary industrial base. Subsequent waves will target their colonies in order of strategic importance." The Admiral activated a holographic display showing the planned attack routes. Kim Dae memorized every detail, knowing that this intelligence could be the difference between survival and extinction for his species. "We estimate that the operation will require 6 standard months to complete," Vexter continued. "Human defenses are significant, but they cannot stand against the combined might of the Galactic Defense Force." Kim Dae felt sick as he watched the aliens plan his species' destruction with cold efficiency. They discussed human casualties like statistics, debated the most effective ways to break human resistance, and planned the distribution of human territory. After the extermination was complete, Captain Songhua received Kim Dae's emergency transmission at the human frontier, colony of New Busan, as the ranking military officer in the outer systems. She was responsible for coordinating human defenses against external threats. The transmission was brief but devastating. Vote passed. Extermination authorized. First wave targets Earth in 6 months. Full operational details attached. Songhua stared at the data packet in disbelief. Humanity had 6 months to prepare for a war they had never expected to fight. 6 months to ready their defenses against the combined might of galactic civilization. She immediately began sending coded messages to every human colony, every military installation, every research facility. The warning was simple, but urgent. Code read, "Prepare for total war." As the Galactic Assembly began to disperse, Kim Dae realized that his mission was far from over. He had the intelligence humanity needed to survive, but first, he had to escape from the heart of enemy territory. The galaxy had voted for human extinction. Now it remained to be seen whether humanity would accept that verdict. Kim Dae crouched in the ventilation shaft, watching as the galactic delegates began to leave the chamber. His mind raced with the implications of what he had just witnessed. The vote was over. Humanity's fate was sealed, and he had the intelligence needed to warn his species, but as he prepared to crawl back through the maintenance tunnels, something stopped him. The injustice of it all was the cold calculation with which these beings had voted to exterminate his entire species. Filled him with a rage he had never felt before. Below him, Fleet Admiral Vexter was still addressing a group of military commanders, discussing the timing of the attack waves and the allocation of forces. They spoke of human deaths like numbers in a ledger, of destroying Earth like it was just another military objective. Kim Dae made a decision that would change everything. Instead of fleeing with the intelligence, he would give the galaxy something they had never expected, a human voice in their own. Chamber of Power. He carefully removed the ventilation grate and dropped silently into the amphitheater. Most of the delegates had left, but several hundred remained. Clustered around the central platform where the military leaders continued their planning, Kim Dae walked calmly down the steps toward the center of the chamber. His holographic disguise was still active, making him appear as a Kelvin traitor, but not for much longer. When he reached the edge of the group surrounding the platform, he stopped. Voice rang out clearly across the chamber. "Excuse me, Admiral. I have a question. About your invasion plans?" Vexter turned to look at him, annoyance clear in his alien features. "This is a restricted military briefing. Who are you?" "I'm someone who has been listening to your discussions with great interest," Kim Dae replied. He reached for the control device it maintained as holographic disguise. "I think it is time you met one of your intended victims." Kim Dae deactivated the hologram. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The alien features melted away, revealing his human face, his human build, his human eyes that blazed with controlled fury. A collective gasp went up from the assembled delegates, followed by shouts of alarm and confusion. "Security," someone shouted. But Kim Dae was already speaking, his voice carrying across the chamber with the authority of someone who had nothing left to lose. "My name is Lieutenant Commander Kim Dae of the Earth Defense Force. I have been sitting in your back row, listening to every word of your so-called trial." The chamber erupted in chaos. Some delegates fled toward the exits, others shouted for guards, and a few simply stared in shock at the human who had appeared in their midst. "You want to know about human capabilities?" Kim Dae continued, his voice cutting through the noise. "You want to understand why we are dangerous? It is because we do not accept defeat. It is because we do not go quietly into extinction." Security. Forces were rushing toward the chamber, but Kim Dae kept talking. He had precious little time to say what needed to be said. "You have spent hours discussing our expansion, our technology, our tactics. But you have never asked the most important question. Why do we fight the way we do?" Fleet Admiral Vexter had drawn his sidearm, but he seemed frozen by the audacity of the human's actions. No one had ever done anything like this before. "Fight desperately because we value life," Kim Dae declared. "We fight creatively because we refuse to accept that there is only one way to solve a problem. We fight with everything we have because we believe in protecting those we love." The security forces had reached the chamber, but they hesitated. This was unprecedented. No one knew exactly what to do about a human who had infiltrated their most secret deliberations. "You say, we are dangerous because we adapt, because we innovate, because we survive against impossible odds," Kim Dae continued. "But these are not crimes. These are the qualities that make us worthy of joining your galactic community." Ambassador Yujin stepped out from behind a pillar where she had been waiting. Her appearance sent another shock through the chamber. Second human, this one clearly a diplomat based on her formal attire. "I am Ambassador Yujin," she announced. "I have been conducting secret negotiations with several species represented in this chamber. We had hoped to avoid this confrontation through peaceful dialogue." The two humans now stood together in the center of the chamber, surrounded by hundreds of alien beings who had just voted to exterminate their species. "You want to know what makes humans truly dangerous?" Yujin asked. "It is not our weapons or our ships or our tactical innovations. It is our refusal to accept that might makes." "Right." She activated a holographic projector. Suddenly, the chamber was filled with images of human achievements that had never been shown in Admiral Zethkol's presentation. Medical advances that could cure diseases affecting dozens of species. Agricultural techniques that could feed billions. Terraforming technologies that could make dead worlds bloom with life. These are the gifts we wanted to share with the galaxy, Yujin explained. Instead, you have chosen to see us only as a threat. Kim Dae picked up the presentation. You fear our expansion, but we have colonized only uninhabited worlds. Fear our military, but we have never initiated aggression against any galactic power. You fear our technology, but we have used it to heal rather than harm. The chamber had fallen silent again. Even the security forces seemed uncertain how to respond to this unprecedented situation. But if you want to see what human military capability really looks like, Kim Dae said, then let me show you something your intelligence services missed. He activated his own holographic display, showing images that made several delegates gasp. In shock, human defense installations that had been hidden from galactic surveillance. Weapon systems that far exceeded what Admiral Zethkal had shown. Ship designs that represented advances beyond anything in the galactic fleet. You have been watching us for 2 centuries, Kim Dae declared, but we have been watching you for longer. We know about your surveillance networks, your intelligence gathering, your military capabilities. We know about this very meeting because we have been monitoring your communications for months. The implications hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. If humans had been watching them, if they had infiltrated galactic communication networks, then the balance of power was not what they had assumed. How long? Admiral Vexter demanded. How long have you been spying on us? Colonel Kang Wu stepped out from another concealed position, the third human to reveal himself in the chamber. He wore the uniform of human military intelligence. Long. Enough, Kang Wu replied. We have observers in your military exercises, your strategic planning sessions, your diplomatic negotiations. We know about your territorial disputes, your resource shortages, your internal conflicts. The chamber erupted, in panicked whispers. If humans had been watching them for an extended period, if they had penetrated galactic security, then the entire foundation of their civilization was compromised. You voted to exterminate us because you feared we might become a threat, Kim, Dae said. But we were never the threat you thought we were. We were the allies you never knew you needed. This changes nothing, Fleet Admiral Vexter declared, though his voice lacked conviction. The vote has been cast. The decision is made. The decision was made by beings who did not have all the facts, Ambassador Yujin replied. Illa? Now you? Do. The question is, what will you do with this knowledge? The 3 humans stood together in the center of the chamber, surrounded by the most powerful beings in the galaxy. They had revealed themselves, shown their hand, and changed the entire nature of the conflict. You can proceed with your extermination plans, Kim Dae said. But now you know that you will not be fighting the primitives you expected. You will be fighting an enemy that has been preparing for this moment, that knows your weaknesses, that has been watching and learning and waiting. Or, Ambassador, Yujin added, you can choose a different path. You can choose to meet us as equals, to learn from us as we learn from you, to build something better than what exists now. The chamber fell silent as the galaxy's representatives contemplated a future they had never imagined. The humans had turned their own trial into a negotiation, their own death sentence into an opportunity for peace. But they had also revealed that the war everyone expected would be far more dangerous than anyone had realized. The massive chamber fell into stunned silence as the 3 humans stood together in the center of the amphitheater. Kim Dae Ambassador Yujin and Colonel Kang Wu had just turned the galaxy's most secure meeting into a stage for humanities. First official diplomatic contact, Council Prime Veltar was the first to recover from the shock. His forearms trembled with rage as he pointed at the humans. This is an outrage. You have violated every law of galactic diplomacy. Security, arrest, these infiltrators immediately. But the security forces hesitated. This situation was unlike anything in their training. How do you arrest beings who have just proven they can infiltrate your most secret facilities? Colonel Kang Wu stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. Before you do anything rash, Council Prime, you should know that this conversation is being broadcast live to every human colony, every human ship, and every human installation in known space. He gestured to a small device on his uniform. We have been transmitting everything that happened in this chamber for the past 6 hours. Every word of your trial, every vote for our extermination, every detail of your planned invasion. The implications hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. If humans had been recording everything, if they had been broadcasting their secret deliberations, then the entire galaxy would soon know what had transpired here. More importantly, Kang Wu continued, this transmission is also being sent to several species that were not invited to your little gathering. The Outer Rim Confederacy, the Free Worlds Alliance, the Independent Systems Coalition. They are all learning about your plans to eliminate an entire species without trial or negotiation. Ambassador Eugene picked up the thread. The galaxy is about to discover that the Great Galactic Council, the supposed guardians of civilization and justice, voted to commit genocide against a species that had never attacked them. Several delegates began to look uncomfortable. The political implications were staggering. Word spread that the established powers had voted to exterminate humanity simply because they feared competition. It could destabilize the entire galactic order. But that is not the worst of it, Kim Dae said, his voice cutting through the chamber like a blade. General Carvas, would you like to explain to the Assembly how long you think your invasion will take? The Titan General's massive form shifted uneasily. 6 months for complete elimination of human presence. Based on what intelligence? Kim Dae asked. Based on the survey data from 50 years ago? Based on the military assessments from the Battle of Kepler, 442. Based on the assumption that we are still the primitive species you first encountered, Kim Dae activated another holographic display, and the chamber filled with images that made even the most hardened military commanders gasp. Human defense installations that looked like nothing in galactic records. Weapon systems that incorporated technologies beyond current understanding. Ship designs that appeared to violate known principles of physics. This is the new Soul Defense Platform, Kim Dae explained, showing a massive structure orbiting a human colony world. It can destroy a battleship at 3 light minutes range. We have 47 of them scattered across our territory. The hologram shifted to show a sleek ship unlike anything in galactic fleets. This is the EDS Indomitable, currently hiding in the asteroid belt of this very system. It's been watching your fleet movements for 3 weeks without being detected.
How weak?
Admiral Vexther's confidence visibly cracked. Impossible. Our sensors would have detected any ship in this system. Your sensors are designed to detect ships built with galactic technology, Colonel Kongwu replied. Human ships use different principles, different materials, different energy signatures. We have been watching you, Admiral, but you have never seen us. The hologram changed again, showing a star map of human space. But this was not the simple 17-system territory that Admiral Zethkal had displayed. This map showed hundreds of installations, dozens of hidden colonies, and defensive networks that spanned multiple star systems. You have been watching. Humanity's public face, Ambassador Eugene explained. The colonies we wanted you to see, the ships we allowed you to detect, the technologies we permitted you to observe. But we have been preparing for this day since we first learned of your existence. The chamber erupted in panicked whispers. If the humans had been hiding their true capabilities, if they had been preparing for war while appearing peaceful, then the entire strategic situation was different than anyone had assumed. How long, Admiral Vexther demanded. How long have you been deceiving us? Since the day we detected your first surveillance probe, Kim Dae replied. Did you think we would not notice alien technology entering our space? Did you think we would not investigate? Did you think we would not prepare for the possibility that you might be hostile? Elder Zarquan of the Ancient Watchers spoke for the first time since the humans had revealed themselves. Show us your true military strength. Kim Dae nodded and activated a new display. The hologram showed the real human fleet, and the numbers were staggering. Thousands of ships, not the few hundred that galactic intelligence had identified. Weapons that could crack planets, shields that could deflect, starfire engines that could outrun anything in the galactic arsenal. The Earth Defense Force currently operates 2,847 combat vessels, Kim Day announced. We have defensive installations in 43 star systems, many of which your surveys never detected. We have allies among species you have never heard of. And we have been preparing for this war for 70 years. The silence in the chamber was deafening. The galaxy's most powerful military leaders were realizing that their planned 6-month extermination campaign might instead be a decades-long struggle against a prepared and dangerous enemy. But here is the most important thing you need to understand. Ambassador Yujin said, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. We did not want this war. We still do not want this war. Everything we have built, every weapon we have created, every alliance we have forged, was designed to prevent this moment. She gestured to the holographic displays showing human military might. This is not a threat. This is a deterrent. We built this strength so that when this day came, you would have to think twice about the cost of your decision. Colonel Kangwu stepped forward. You voted to exterminate us because you feared we might become a threat. But by making that vote, you have guaranteed that we will become exactly what you feared. The logic was inescapable. By voting for human extinction, the galaxy had created the very enemy they had hoped to prevent. So now you have a choice, Kim, Day said. You can proceed with your invasion plans, knowing that you will face an enemy that has been preparing for this war longer than some of your species have been spacefaring. The casualties will be enormous on both sides, and the outcome is far from certain. Or, Ambassador Yujin added, you can choose to see this as an opportunity. Humanity has technologies, perspectives, and capabilities that could benefit everyone. We could be partners instead of enemies. Council Prime Veltar found his voice again. You expect us to simply ignore the vote? To pretend that the will of the galaxy means nothing? We expect you to be intelligent enough to recognize when the abrupt situation has changed, Kim Day replied. The vote was based on incomplete information. Now you have the complete picture. The three humans stood together, waiting for the galaxy's response. They had revealed their hand, shown their strength, and offered both a threat and an opportunity. Choice is yours, Ambassador Yujin said. Choose wisely, because whatever you decide now will determine whether humanity becomes the galaxy's greatest ally or its most implacable enemy. The chamber remained silent, as the most powerful beings in the galaxy contemplated a future they had never imagined. The humans had turned their own trial into a negotiation, their own death sentence into a choice between war and peace, but they had also made it clear that whatever the galaxy chose, humanity would not go quietly into extinction. The question now was whether the galaxy was wise enough to choose coexistence over conflict. The fate of trillions hung in the balance. And for the first time in galactic history, the choice belonged as much to the humans as to their would-be. Judges Kim Day looked around the chamber one last time, then began walking toward the exit. We will give you 1 week to decide, he announced. After that, we will assume you have chosen war. The three humans walked out of the chamber together, leaving behind a galaxy that would never be the same. The age of human isolation was over. The age of human partnership or human war was about to begin. The choice was theirs to make.